All right, welcome to Learning with Lewis. This morning we're going to discuss best practices for loading e-resource records. Again, we're just going to discuss some best practices. These aren't hard and fast rules. These are just some things that Lisa and I have kind of compiled working on various projects. So this is also going to be a sharing session. If anybody in here has some suggestions or comments, please feel free to send your tips and tricks through as well. We will be monitoring the chat box as we go through this, but it might be a little delayed since we'll be kind of tossing the ball back and forth here. So if you don't see us answering one of your questions, just try to ping us or maybe raise your hand. But there will also be a question and answer session at the end. So if we do miss your question, just please repeat it for us at that time. So just to make sure everybody can hear me, correct? All right, awesome. Okay, so let's get started then. Does this person look familiar? Did you just get an email saying that you have a file of records from a vendor sitting out on a server somewhere and they're waiting for you to load? Does that thought immediately make you want to pull your hair out? Well, we don't want you to feel stressed at the thought of having to do that, so that's why we decided to come up with this webinar on best practices, because we want to kind of de-stress this process. So one of the questions you might ask is, do I even need to load the records I just received from the vendor? Well, honestly, that really depends. Some of these ebooks may, or some of these e-resources may be in your monthly holdings management load. Well, how do you know whether they are or not? They might not be included in your monthly holdings management load if you get the Lewis file and this is not a Lewis purchase resource. They might not be in your monthly load if you don't actually have them selected in holdings management. That is an option if you don't actually want to load the records from the vendor. Sometimes these packages aren't actually available in holdings management, so you need to load the records for the vendor if you want to make them discoverable in your catalog. And sometimes they're actually available in holdings management, but you don't like the quality of the records. You would prefer the full records from the vendor. If any of those apply to you, at that point is when you want to consider loading the vendor records. Oops.
So we're going to outline the process here in this Learning with Lewis today. We're going to check the file. We're going to create a holding code. We're going to create a report template, load the records, delete the records, and clean up. Now, we won't actually be doing this because we don't really want to mess up anyone's test system, so we have screenshots and descriptions of each part of the process.
So next, we're going to actually discuss checking the file, and there are various reasons why you should do this, which I'll go into in a minute. But first, we're going to look at a couple of ways that you can actually check the file. One way you can do it is just by loading the file in test with no special parameters, just putting them in there and then taking a gander at the record. But another way that you can also do it is using an editing tool like Mark Edit. This is a particularly useful tool if you have a good suspicion that you're going to actually need to edit the records. That way you're not replicating your process. So why are you checking the file? What exactly are you looking for? Well, one thing you're looking for is to make sure that your file contains the number of records expected. You also probably want to find out what title control sources might be included in there to make sure that future loads will match and update appropriately. You also want to look for your call numbers. Most of the time, because we are discussing e-resource records here, most of the time you're probably going to want to use an 099 available online call number. That is sometimes included in your file if the vendor can do those customizations for you, but sometimes it's not and you need to add it yourself. The same with the Easy Proxy prefix. Sometimes the vendor can actually pre-pin the URL in the 856 with that. Sometimes they can't. And also you need to see if copy holdings are processed with a 9XX tag. So what to do if what you're looking for is missing? Well, if you're missing or have incorrect records or title control numbers aren't in the record, then you want to contact the vendor because something's probably wrong with the record file. If the 099 available call number is missing, then you want to edit the file. Same thing for the Easy Proxy prefix. If there's no copy holdings in the 9XX, then you can use a holding code policy to create copy holdings. So how do I check or edit the file? I'm going to do a quick demonstration of using MarcEdit to do this in a minute, but I just want to let you know that we have already recorded a Learning with Lewis tutorial. It's a short 4-minute video with the few basics that I'm going to go over here. And Natalie Palermo has actually provided a much more advanced sampler of MarcEdit tasks with a previous Learning with Lewis. The URLs are available right there. They will also be published on our training portal, which should be public soon, hopefully. All right, so I'm going to quickly do a live demonstration of this. I have to escape out of here. Okay, so the first thing I want to do to check my file is I need to break the file to make it human readable. Now I say break the file because that to me is a mnemonic device that'll actually allow me to remember that I need to make sure that mark breaker is the selection I have is the function I have selected. So the first thing I need to do is give it my source file. So I've actually set up a file on my desktop labeled mark records. It's a single location file that I can easily locate any mark records I need to find. I've downloaded these GVRL records from the vendor. And I'm going to put that in as my source file, and then I'm going to give it then I need to give it my destination file. Now I'm going to name this GVRL edits because I know this is going to be my edit file. And if you see my file extension here is .mrk, that's indicating to me that I'm putting it into a human readable format. I'm going to click save, and then I'm going to click execute. Now you see once it finished processing here, it gives me this message. And edit records becomes available to click on. I'm now going to click that, and I would do this whether or not I actually need to edit the records because this is how it allows me to view them. All right, so now we see this is human readable. It's much easier to read than that other gobbledygook, as I like to call it. So like I said, one of the first things we're looking for is title control sources. A popular one that vendors like to use is the 001. They put a local number in the 001. These are ebooks, so we also see that we have ISBN numbers, and we have an OCLC 035. So those are my 3 possible title control sources, so my best matches. So I'm going to jot those down really quick. I've already done that. And I'm going to note those so that I'm ready to put those in my Bibliographic template when I get to that point. Now, I do see that my 099 available online call number is missing, and my 856 does not have my Easy Proxy prepended. So I'm going to make those edits really quickly. The first thing I'm going to do is add my available online call number. To do that, I'm going to go to Tools. I'm going to do Add Delete Field. Now I'm going to type in 099 for my field number, but you can see you can actually select it from the drop-down. Going to put in my indicators and add my delimiter, and then type available online. Now I like to misspell this a lot, so I kind of always make sure that I have it spelled correctly. And then I'm going to click add field. I'm going to leave the defaults here and then click add field. All right, now it tells me that it added 267 fields. I know that's how many records are processed, so we're good. Click OK. And I'm done with that. I don't need to add any more fields, so I'm going to close it. And I can see that my 099 was inserted right where I expect it to be. So the next thing I'm going to do is edit my subfield data. I'm going to use my tool, my Edit Subfield Data tool, to do that. Now, I know the field that I need to edit is in 856. The URL is in subfield U. I'm going to enter that there. And because I want to prepend it to the start of that field, I'm going to type up hat or caret lowercase b. That actually tells the software to add it to the beginning of the line. Then in the replace with field, I'm going to copy and paste my Easy Proxy prefix. And you see here, I had it ready to go because I knew I would probably need it. So there we go. And then I'm going to click replace text. It's going to ask me if I want to continue. Say yes, and then it tells me 267 modifications were made. Okay, I'm good there. So I'm going to close. Now, I can see that my Easy Proxy prefix has been prepended, and it is done so correctly. So now I'm ready to actually make this a MARC file that I can load into my system. To do that, I'm going to remake the file by compiling it. I'm going to go to File, Compile File into MARC, save it as GVRL edited, so I know it's the one I actually want to load, and click Save. And that is actually the end of that process. So again, we have a tutorial that goes through that short little process, but there are also some other really cool things you can do with MarcEdit that is available in a previous Learning with Lewis recording. And now Lisa is going to actually explain to you how you set up a holding code policy.
So your file that you're trying to load may or may not have the information in the 9XX field. And even if it does, you may still want to specify a holding code because you want to make sure that your records are loaded with the correct library, item type, item categories, so that you can easily identify the records in your system and later remove them when it's necessary.
I'm missing my cues, sorry.
That's all right. Creating a holding code, it's pretty easy, and it really is your new best friend. The holding code policies are located in the configuration toolbar under the cataloging configuration area, and I have an example here from ULL. And you can see pretty easily by the name and description what this holding code was used for. It was used for their ebook collection for EBSCO, in particular the business ebook collection. So that's probably the most important thing here, is to easily identify this holding code so you can tell at a glance what it's used for, and there will be hopefully no errors. So you need to make it very specific. You need to remember that it's like all policies, so the code and name are limited to 10 characters. And then you need to make your selections. You pick your library, you pick your location. Again, these are selections that ULL used. You can use whatever you want here. You can see they used e-resources or item type, and they have 3 categories. These categories are very important, and they chose to use ebook as a sort of a broad category for item category 1, but then they narrowed it down what vendor, it's EBSCO. They put that in item category 3, and furthermore, which collection is it from EBSCO? It's business, and they put that in item category 4. So when they load these records, it's going to use, in the BibLoad, it's going to use this holding code, and those records are already going to be created with these specific policies. Now, you may not have these policies created, and that's fine. If you don't, you need to go ahead and create them ahead of time in test, do everything in test first. Then you ask for a halt and run if you want to immediately start playing with the new holding code, and we can make it available. But again, these are not categories you have to use. These are just some examples. You can use up to 5 categories. You can see they chose 3 out of the 5. Jamie?
Sorry, I thought I unmuted me. My apologies. Okay, so now you've checked your file and you have your holding code created, and now you're ready to load the records. Well, one of the first things you want to do is set up a report template of the BibLoad report so that you don't have to set up the report every time. You have a report in the can ready to go when it's time to load these records, or reload the records when the vendor sends updates. So I'm going to run through some screenshots showing you the BibLoad report criteria and discuss some things. And then after that, we'll actually do a live demonstration of setting up a BibLoad template. Okay, it keeps muting me for some reason. I know I'm not clicking that. Sorry. Okay, so the first thing is report basics. This report is located under the Mark Import group of reports. I often look for it under bibliographic, but it's not there, so just remember it's under Mark Import reports. The one you want to select is loading bibliographic records. It has the source code of BibLoad. We always recommend that you create a report template per file source or per file. Like if you have a single source like EBSCO, but you have multiple collections coming from them, then you probably want to, and you set up a holding code per collection, then you want to set up a report template per collection so that you don't actually have to remember to go in and change your holding code. If you just want one template and you change your holding code each time you run it, that's fine too. Always, always, always give the report template a descriptive name, a meaningful descriptive name. The load tab of this report is where you're going to do most of your work, but to actually save the template as a template, you have to have a file to load. We don't have our files on the server yet, and everybody should actually have a dummy file, an empty file sitting on your server that's there for this express purpose. So the first thing you do when you go to the load tab is you're going to select dummy from the file to load. That will allow you to save this as a template. If you do not see a dummy file in your list of files to load, open a footprint and let us know. All right, so one of the first things you see when you open the bib load report is the title control matching rules. There are 5 matching rules to choose from. The report actually defaults to Rule 2, but Rule 4 is the one most commonly used for electronic resources. You can see there that it says that records that are new to the system will be created and records that match existing records will be updated according to other settings in the report. Some of the things that the report updates is the delete status, the date catalogs, and record format. Now, please remember that the report does not actually update call numbers unless they're auto-generated, but sometimes it does that imperfectly, and it does not update item information. So if you load the records with the wrong call number, you're going to get auto-generated call numbers unless it matches the LC050, for example, and you'll actually have to put in a footprint to have any item information updated. All right, so we checked our file for our title control sources. And we're going to use that gadget there at the end of the field to select our title control sources. Now, you have the option to select one match point or multiple. And remember, that order is very important. It's going to actually read from the top down, and the first one that it finds, it's going to match on. And that's what it's going to set as the title control. So if you have a preference, you need to make sure that you have it listed hierarchically. All right. Many vendors, like we saw with the GVRL records, use a unique number in the local 001. So you see I actually put that there. Some depend on the OCLC 035. I also included that as a selection criteria. Some use both. And as we saw in the GVRL, the ISBN 020 is also a possible match point. Now, again, you see on the screenshot there, I listed every common possible match point that we often see. If you want to cover all your bases, that's fine, but it's still good to check your file and identify what the actual match point is going to be for that specific collection. And if the vendor has actually included a number in the local number 001, it's a good practice to use that as your preferred match point. All right, so in the general information field, we're going to set the update date catalog to today. And to do that, we're going to click the gadget and we're going to actually select the word today. You probably don't want to put a specific date in there when you're saving it as a template, because if you then run it but don't change the date, it's going to set all of the date catalog to February 25th, 2016, and you may actually be running this in March or April. So if you set it to today, it will actually set the date catalog as the day of the report run. And you need to select a default record format. You select from the drop-down. The system will actually read this information from the leader, but it will default back to this selection if for some reason that information isn't contained in the leader. All right, next we have bibliographic record processing. You just want to kind of eyeball and confirm that the update bibliographic record when updating records is checked. That's checked by default, but sometimes, if you accidentally click on the screen, you might uncheck it. So you just want to make sure that that's checked so that the bib records will actually be updated when you run the file. You can check the box to remove junk entries. These junk entries are read from a file on the server. If you're not sure if you have any existing junk entries or if you want to add some junk entries, open a footprint to review or add entries to this file. And you also have the option of removing unwanted subject headings. You can see I showed an example there of some possible unwanted subject headings. Or you can simply leave the defaults. Now, copy processing. You have two questions here when it goes into copy processing. Are you going to create update copies based on a holding code, or are you going to create update copies based on 9XX copy processing? Now, again, we checked our file to identify the file that we looked at didn't actually use 9XX copy processing. So we're going to actually use a holding code for that process. So if you're going to depend solely on a holding code, then you can keep the default rule, which is to ignore holdings and create one copy when creating a title, and then you select your holding code that you created from that drop-down menu. Now, if you're going to depend on 9XX copy processing, then you use the gadget up there by the copy processing to change the rule, and you're going to select the create copies using holding statements when creating a title, and then give it the entry ID to identify. 949 is the most commonly used, but other 9XX fields are also used. You will also always need to select a default holding code for the system to use if there is an error with 9XX copy processing, and sometimes 9XX copy processing actually just includes a holding code. So if it doesn't find that holding code in your system, then it's going to not know what to do. All right, so then next, we kind of skipped a little bit there, but next we have the call number load rules. The report actually defaults to the LC050. You can use the gadget there to change the load rule. Again, because these are e-resource records, we're going to go with the available online call number. So what I've done there is I've actually just wiped the slate clean and removed the default. I did that by clicking on it and then clicking remove at the bottom. So now I have a clean slate. Now, order is important here. The first one it reads and matches is the one it's going to use. It's very important to remember. If it doesn't find a match, it's going to create the auto-generated call numbers. You'll see those with the XXX in parentheses followed by certain numbers. Now, auto-generated call numbers, like I said earlier, can be updated with the BibLoad report, but it's not always perfect. So now, remember, if the call number processing does find a call number match based on the rules that you've selected, but it's not the actual call number that you wanted, it will load the incorrect call number. And by that, I mean, say you've selected the option of having the 099 available online and your second rule is the LC050. It doesn't find the 099, but it finds the 050. It's going to load the LC call number in that field. But for the purposes of your load, that's the incorrect call number. Those call numbers cannot actually be updated by rerunning the BibLoad report. You have to open a footprint and get Lewis to help you clean that up. So that's one really important reason you check the file, to always make sure that your desired call number is contained in the file before loading. All right, so we're going to add call number rules. So to select the classification scheme, you simply use the drop-down menu. As is the recommended classification scheme for the 099 call number. Then you select the correct entry ID from the drop-down menu. Use the gadget to check off the appropriate subfields. Generally, it's subfield A. And then you indicate whether it should use the first or last occurrence. Generally, you use the first occurrence. Now, I do this all the time. So don't forget to actually click Add. Don't immediately click OK, because if you click OK, you're going to have to start all over again. Click Add first, add as many rules as you want, then click OK. All right, so we've actually run through the BibLoad template, but one thing's missing. Our file isn't on the server, and it's not going to do me any good to actually run this process, run this report without my file sitting on the server. So how do I get the file on the server? Well, there are a couple of ways. You can use FTP desktop clients like WinSCP or FileZilla, or you can actually use the built-in utility in Symfony workflows. I will actually do a live demonstration of that process next. All right. All right, everybody can see workflows there? Okay, so the first thing I need to do is I need to get my file on the server. Oh, I'm sorry. First thing I need to do is actually set up my report template, right? So I'm going to go to Reports, Schedule New Report. Again, I'm going to go to the Mark Import group of reports and click Load Bibliographic Records. Now again, the source code here is bibload. Then click Setup and Schedule. This is going to be Jaime's GVRL Learning with Lewis template. That's a very long name, but you see it is very descriptive and meaningful, and I will know immediately after this I can go delete it from here. All right, so I'm going to set my file to load as dummy, and then I'm going to change my title control matching rule to Rule 4, because like we discussed, that's the most commonly used for electronic resources. Now I'm going to identify my title control sources. I know for my file I had the 001, the 035, and the 020. So I'm going to set those as my options and click OK. All right, now we didn't discuss this earlier when we were running through. We'll actually touch on this in a little bit, but I'll go ahead and mention it now. Because I know that this vendor actually gives me a deletes file later down the road, I'm going to change my delete status to deleted so that when I run that file with this report, it will remove those records and I don't have to go any further. I'm going to set update date catalog to today. Okay. These are ebooks, so I'm going to go with Mark as my default record format. I'm not really worried about my junk entries or my subject headings. So then my copy processing, I'm going to leave the default, but I sometimes like to just click on it just to make sure. Click OK. All right, and my call number load rule, I'm going to do this a bit differently than how I did it in the screenshot, but either way is good. I'm going to actually just update the existing. I'm going to do as is, 099, subfields, unselect that, select that, and make sure first is selected, then click update. All right, I'm good there, and then I'm going to say OK. So I see there that it's changed. And because I know this is a package of Gale books, I'm going to look for the handy dandy ebook GVRL holding code that someone set up in the system. All right, so quick glance just to make sure everything's good there. I'm happy. I'm now going to save as a template. Report template is saved. Okay, so now the next important step is to get my file on the on the server so that I can actually run that report with it. So to do that, I'm going to go to Utility, Mark Import. I'm going to just keep the defaults here. I'm going to find my source file, which again I have saved in my single destination folder on my desktop that's easy to get to. And it's going to be the GVRL edited. I'm going to click OK, and then I'm just going to give it a quick file handle here, GVRL EBKS. There we go. Click Import. Now, I don't have any files to load at this point, but if I needed to load more files, I could just say yes and keep uploading the files until I was ready to stop. So I'm going to say no. All right. And now the system gives me a quick little report saying how many records it's processed. So this is something that I can use to compare to my finished report log later. All right, so I've done all that. My file's on the server. I've edited my file. I've set up my report template. My file is now on the server, so what do I do next? Now I actually run the file. I run the report to put it in the system. To do that, again, I'm going to be in test, which I am in test. Y'all just can't see the logo for some reason. I'm going to do this in test, and I'm going to find my template, which is this one here. I'm going to click Setup and Schedule. Then I'm going to go to the Load tab, give it another quick glance just to make sure I didn't make any changes but forgot to actually save it. And then I'm going to select my GVRL ebooks file that I just put on the server. And then I would click Run Now or Schedule. I'm not actually going to run this because I don't want to put these records in someone's test system, but just to let you know, this is how you could do it. You can actually set it to run ASAP with an email to yourself so that you don't have to sit there and watch the finished report log. or you can just click Run Now. All right, and that is the handy-dandy bib load process. You get the... All right, so again, like I mentioned, going through that process with the delete status, there are a couple of ways that you can actually delete records. And one of the ways is using the bibload report to actually delete the records. You do this when the vendor provides a delete file. You use the same bibload template that you set up for that source, and you make sure that the delete status is set to deleted and run the report. You can save that setting in the template so you don't have to change it later. Now, some of you may have heard on the listservs that we'll actually be switching to this process with the holdings management load every month. We'll be getting a smaller file that will just include add, updates, and deletes. So one of the things we're going to have to do is change our monthly process. Previously, we've done it in the way that Lisa will describe shortly after this, but now we're going to actually go set our bibload templates to the deleted status, and then the bibload will actually do all the work for us, so we don't have any extra reports to run. And you'll notice over here, this was a test run. This was a test run I did for an add, update, delete holdings management load. And you can see here, it'll actually tell you how many items it deleted, how many bib records it deleted. So it's one and done at that point, okay? But Lisa's gonna actually talk to you about the alternative way to delete records.
As Jaime said, the file of records you can get with the delete is a clean way to do it, but you're not always able to get that file. So you need an alternative way to remove these records. And the set items to discard and remove discard item reports can help you do this. Both these reports have selection criteria that allow you to target these records you need to remove. And again, remember, it depends on how specific you were with that holding code or the 9XX field. The more specific, the easier it is going to be to remove the records. The set items to discard report identifies the set of records based on your criteria, and it changes the current location, not the home, the current, of these records to discard. Then the next step, okay, when you've done that, they're no longer available for viewing in the OPAC because they have a shadowed location now of discard. So the next step would be to run the remove discard report. Again, it has selection criteria, and it's looking for current location discard. And at this step, when you run this remove discard, it permanently removes the record from Symphony. There is an update option in set items to discard so you can test without actually updating. There is no such option for RIM discard. So they're very powerful. You need to be extra cautious with these two reports, especially the RIM discard. Here's some examples of some selection criteria based on that earlier holding code. The home location I put as online because that's what these records have in the system, the home, not the current location. Under the title selection tab, there's several different fields with different criteria. The only two I pulled out right now is the date created, because I'm assuming that I know exactly when I created these records. That's not always the case. So you may not want to use date created. The other important piece under this title selection is created by, and this will mess you up many times. It's messed me up many times because this is not the user record. This is the user access policy of the person who loaded the records, who created the records. So you need to think about who is loading the records, because you need to know which user access policy you specify when you want to remove these records, if you want to use this field. Under the item selection tab, you can see I have the library, current location, item type, and then those three item categories that are specified in the holding code that were loaded. So the records I want to pull out have all these criteria, so I can target just the ones I want to remove. And again, the update option tab is your friend. You want to uncheck it so you don't update the first time you run this. And again, you want to test all this on your test server first. And it will tell you how many items will be set to discard, not how many actually are until you run it and check that box. So let's assume you've run the report, you've updated the records, they all have current location now of discard. Then you want to run remove discard. Now, some sites might choose to run it wide open with the only criteria is current location discard because they don't care if it's this load or whatever record has been marked for discard. They just want to get them all out of the system. You can do that. But if you want to just target the ones that you marked with your set items to discard report, you need to put some selection criteria more than the current location discard. So I put library of UL Dupree, the home location, the item type, item category 1 and 3, and somehow I missed the next one 4. But normally I would put that business one in there too. Somehow I just missed it when I made the screenshot. Again, this is a really powerful report. The print item tab is also a good thing to look at very carefully because you want to print. You can print everything you're going to remove out of the system. If you're removing 10,000 records, you want to make sure you're only putting very minimal information to print out. You can specify fields, copy information, mark holdings information, call number, title. So you want to take a good look at that tab and think about what you want in that printed report output. And once you run this report, they're gone. That's it. So you might, like I said, please try all this on the test system first when you're doing this. And that way, if you have a problem with your selection criteria, you can tweak it before moving on to production. So what happens when you do mess up? Well, first thing, you don't panic because if you're doing this in test, it's pretty easy. We just have Cersei make a copy, production to test. If you made it in production, don't panic, just open the footprint. But the only thing we ask is you open the footprint as soon as possible and don't let days or weeks go by before you open the footprint. It's much easier for us to work with if we know right away and can clean it up right away for you. So does anybody have a question at this point? I think we've come to the end of our presentation. We hope it's been helpful and we can take questions.
Right. And again, we were kind of just aiming at some best practices that we've compiled based on various projects we've worked on. If you have any kind of best practices at your library that you'd like to share, send them out to us because we're happy to also include those on our future training portal that will be made public sometime soon. So again, like Lisa asked, does anybody have any questions, comments, anything you want us to maybe review again? Right. Well, and we're always happy to help Zoella or anybody else who needs help. Yes, again, and we wanted to put this video together because we kind of wanted to de-stress the process, maybe give you something that you could just run through right before you have to load a big file of records or anything like that. Also, we wanted to remind everybody that we are willing to basically manage electronic loads for you if that's something that you want us to do. In particular, the holdings management load, if you're still managing your own each month and you're interested in us doing that for you, we can do that. So just, again, send in a footprint and we're happy to help. It doesn't look like anybody has any questions, so I think we can probably bring this to a conclusion. And we'll have the recording available. Sometimes it takes WebEx a little while to process, so we should have the recording available to send out to everyone by tomorrow, Monday at the latest. So again, if nobody has any last-minute questions, Lisa and I would like to thank you for joining us. Again, if you have any suggestions or best practices of things you do at your library and are willing to share, send them to us and we'll publish those as well.
Thank you.